ISO 37001 is an international standard which defines requirements for an anti-bribery management system. It's an interesting standard and it addresses a sensible subject, a form of corruption, bribery that is ever present in our modern society. Among many other requirements, this standard discusses about an anti-bribery culture that the organization should develop, maintain, and promote. So, what does this anti-bribery culture actually mean? How can an organization develop such a culture? Well, the standard emphasizes that building an anti-bribery culture requires active, visible, and sustained commitment from the organization's leadership. This means that top management, the governing body, if such a structure exists, and other levels of management should continually model the behavior they expect from others. People throughout the company look to leadership. So if managers don't take anti-bribery seriously, no one else will either, and there is no chance of establishing an organizational culture that supports ethics and integrity. So top management has a special role to play. They are expected to encourage ethical behavior, and they should not tolerate any conduct that undermines or compromises the company's anti-bribery efforts. Let's go into some details and see what can be done to build and support this kind of culture in an organization. Well, first of all, it should be clear that it cannot be just about some posters and some slogans. An organizational culture is built over time and it requires much more, especially examples, repetition, and recognition. ISO 37001 highlights some of the key factors that help develop and maintain an anti-bribery culture. And one of them is leadership by example. Management must not only talk about ethics, they must also act accordingly. People need to see that leadership follows the rules and takes the anti-bribery system seriously. Another important point is mentoring. Leaders should take the time to coach and guide others, especially new employees, on what the organization stands for when it comes to integrity and ethical conduct. Speaking of new employees, onboarding and induction programs should include a clear message about the organization's commitment to anti-bribery. From day one, people should understand that bribery is not tolerated and that compliance is not optional. Communication is another critical component. There should be ongoing communication in the form of reminders, newsletters, or updates from leadership to reinforce the importance of integrity in everyday operations. Recognition matters a lot. When someone does the right thing, especially when it's not the easy thing, that behavior should be acknowledged. Positive reinforcement helps create an environment where ethical behavior becomes the norm. And equally important, when someone acts in a way that goes against the company's anti-bribery principles, the response must be consistent. And it shouldn't matter if it's a junior employee or a high-level manager, that behavior must be addressed fairly and without bias. That's easier said than done, but is essential for building trust. Now, how can an organization know whether this kind of anti-bribery culture really exists and functions? There are several signs. For example, one is whether the actions we just discussed, like leadership by example, communication, recognition, are actually implemented and practiced or just described in some documents, some procedures. Another is what employees believe. Do people across the company truly feel that leadership is committed to anti-bribery? Do they see it in everyday decisions and behavior, or do they think it's just for show? It also matters whether employees understand how this anti-bribery culture applies to their specific roles. Everyone should be able to make the connection between their day-to-day tasks and the anti-bribery objectives of the company. And lastly, there's ownership of corrective actions. When something goes wrong, whether it's a mistake or a deliberate violation, does the organization take real action? And not just by blaming individuals, but by learning from the situation and preventing it from happening again. These are some suggestions for how an organization can determine whether it has managed to implement the anti-bribery culture discussed by ISO 37001. As you probably know, this standard can be used for auditing and certification purposes. So a company can implement an anti-bribery management system and then be audited externally, and if compliance with the standard's requirements exist, then it can obtain a certification to ISO 37001. I believe it is really difficult to evaluate during an external audit whether an anti-bribery culture exists in an organization. It's important to do it because the existence of such a culture can be the difference between a management system that works and one that is only on paper. However, audits are like snapshots. They capture a moment in time, so it can be challenging for an auditor who is also external to the organization to assess in just a few hours or even a few days whether a culture of integrity and ethical behavior has truly been embedded across the company. But this is what the standard expects. Top management is the key element here. I say it again. If top management shows active and visible commitment to building and sustaining an anti-bribery culture, then the requirements of the standard can be fulfilled. Otherwise, it's difficult. So, if you're interested in this standard, ISO 37001, I have an online course on Udemy that covers all its requirements. You'll find the link to the course in the description below, along with our website, RigCert Education, where you can explore more courses and resources on management systems and ISO standards.